Welcome into 11 Personnel presented by Monticello Bank. Nick Roush and Adam Luckett are here in Dallas. We wish Dallas was in Tennessee, but it's not. It's in Texas. We're in the Lone Star State. We're having a blast here at SEC Media Days, and we'll be here for the next 4 nights. Not a static time whatsoever. 11 Personnel doesn't operate around rules, but Monticello Bank, they have rules. Good rules, though. Rules that keep them in business for over 128 years. They got branches in 21 different branches in 14 counties. They've been in business for a long time because they're putting the numbers on your side. Proud presenting sponsors of 11 Personnel. It's Monticello Bank. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Today's exciting. We got the buzz today, the first buzz of SEC Media Days. It's a little bit different. Everything's bigger in Texas, and Luckett, the Omni here, it was big. Like you just everything about our short stroll right on down there in downtown Dallas. Everything, it's so far Dallas living up to its name, all the way down to the Cowboys obsession, where we actually saw a Cowboys gym.
I can't get over that. Like Jerry Jones, dude, can you does he white with $50 bills? I mean, what's going on here?
It was a gym. We what did it say? Cowboys Fit?
Yeah. Cowboys, cowboy, train like a cowboy.
Yeah, we thought it was like they're selling Cowboys merch.
I'm not joking.
It was
the gym said train like a cowboy. They had the star in there. They had some nice signage.
Yeah, and it's just like a gym right in the most expensive district in downtown Dallas.
20-year-old people in there working out.
Yep.
I could not believe it. So that's one of the highlights of this trip will be at the Cowboys gym.
It's a different place. We're slowly getting our toes wet. We were stuck inside a hotel for most of the day. We're going to venture out some more tonight. We watched a soccer match last night. It's hot here. One thing about Texas, warm. Is fair?
Heat is in Texas. We are interesting idea to bring this event to Dallas in the middle of July. Yeah. But I'm here for it. The first time in Texas, I'm having a good time. People are really super nice. The food was outstanding. I know a lot of people, you don't care, but Tyler Thompson is listening.
Yes.
Food was great. We're going to eat some more barbecue tonight. So
I'm going to have brisket in my veins by the time this thing's over with. I'm just going to be loaded with brisket to the gills. We did get off to a little bit of a rocky start. It actually happened before we even left because the Lucketts, they had a 2-year-old birthday party, and it was chaos, as you might expect. The Roushes, we showed up. We do hang out outside of work, and it turns out the kids weren't the one that was bleeding. But before we'd even left, I'm the one who's suffered an injury and got my foot in a bathtub, hosing it down because I'm just bleeding everywhere. I don't know how it happened. I really don't. It was ow, that hurt. And then I looked down to watch a horse race at Saratoga, and I look up and there's blood all over the carpet. So I don't really know what to explain. But
is that the first time you've bled during a horse racing event?
No. Hell no. So, but all in all, it's like, okay, all right. If this is the worst part of our week, is me scraping my foot on the side of a floorboard and bleeding a little bit, we'll be fine. The drive did pretty good, right? I
think we caught some good fortune.
Yeah,
with the drive. It wasn't too bad until we stumbled upon Garland, Texas. A little bit of user error with the GPS.
Yeah,
and we got to see, Mad Max type road construction here in Dallas.
And ironic because Tyrese Maxey from Garland, Texas, where just in strip malls and Tyrese Maxey. That's Garland, Texas. It was everywhere. But, we survived it, and we're able to do it thanks to our presenting sponsors from SEC Media Days. That's Friends of Cole. You know Friends of Cole. You see them on the license plate all the time. Well, they're dedicated to informing and educating Kentucky citizens about the local coal industry and its vital role in our state's future. They provide a united voice for an industry that has been and remains a critical economic contributor to Kentucky. By working together, they can provide good jobs and benefits for future generations. Coal is resilient, it's reliable, it's affordable. Friends of Coal, it's a volunteer organization. All are invited to participate in that organization, which has proud Kentuckians and residents from beyond the border. So head on over to friendsofcoalkentucky.org to learn more. That's friendsofcolekentucky.org to learn more. I'm a friend of Cole, came from Cole, grandmother. She was born in a Cole town in Lynch. Grandfather wrote script there. We got Cole in these blood veins. I'm not just some private city slicker from the big city in Louisville, all right? I do wish I had a heart hat, though. We need to get Freddie's heart hat.
We need the Cole whistle.
Yeah.
The Cole whistle. Friends of Cole and the Cole whistle on 11 personnel. What could be any better than that?
This is our first.
The Cole whistle on the game, on the video game.
Yeah, that's awesome. It really is. That's our first. It's our first SEC Media Days without Freddie Maggard. I know he's fired up to have Friends of Cole join us. So we're fired up to be here. And I'm also a little worried because Peke's pointing the microphone at us. Did the mic go out?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you're just a little helping out.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Do I need to hold it?
He feels like, the guys in the movie that hold the boom mics or whatever? That's what Peke looks like right now.
It's great because we actually have a guy behind the camera instead of so it's like, remember in The Office when they had that weird storyline with.
She's dating like the cameraman?
Yeah, the cameraman's like flirting with her and he comes over and says, "Are you all right?" And it's like, dude, cameraman, get the hell out of here. Pam. Bad character. Not ideal. I digress.
Most people agree with that.
Yeah.
Taylor at home, I've tried to have the conversation with her about Pam. Maybe he's not the best. She is not wanting to hear it, but most people, I feel like Taylor's in the minority on that. Which, by the way, Taylor, happy birthday! Love you very much.
Great job. You had to work that one in there. But we're happy to be here at SEC Media Days. Thanks to Friends of Cole. But like I said, it's usually we're just 3 days. You kind of half day. You get the hell out on Thursday. Kentucky. Mark Stoops is going on Thursday for the first time. That's going to be a late one, around 3 or 4 Eastern, if I'm not mistaken. Today was an absolute sprint with Sankey and 4 coaches. In the past, it was only 3. So we got a lot to chew on in this first episode, which is going to end with a conversation with Andy Staples. Great friend of the program, great show, on 3. Great college football guy. So that was a lot of fun, a conversation to see.
And a lot of that conversation with Andy is really centered around the new additions and what Texas and Oklahoma bring. And to me, where's the hierarchy in the league? We know Kirby Smart's out here kicking everyone's ass. Everyone knows this. But, where does everybody else fall in this post-Nick Saban world and with inserting Boomer Sooner and Hook 'em Horn? Where does everything fall?
There's a power vacuum.
Yeah, I don't think we know, where everyone's going to settle, what slot people are going to settle in over these next 3, 4, 5 years. And then, what does it even matter if, 4 teams can get into the playoff, which is all it's about. You got 2 years of 12, and then, kind of an underrated aspect of all this, we're going 14 in 2026. So even more teams are going to get in. And this 2-year period, specifically this year, how does that determine what we look like in 2026? Yeah. The SEC going to add Florida State, Clemson. Greg Sankey says they're not shopping right now. He's not out there recruiting.
Yeah, he's not a recruiter. He's not engaged, but he's observing.
Which is fine. But then he also mentions how important the footprint is, having a continuous kind of same geographical area. Well, guess who fits in that footprint,
Yeah,
and maybe it's not Florida State, Clemson. Maybe it's in North Carolina. Maybe it's Virginia. So are they open for business? Are they shopping if Clemson and Florida State get out of that grant of rights and going into 26 when we go to 14 teams? And so that was interesting. Andy's interview was really all about Texas, Oklahoma, where everything sits and what to kind of expect. And we kind of get into some Kentucky stuff as well.
Yeah. But just to go back to Sankey, because there was first on the conference expansion, I understand why he says what he says and it makes total sense. And I get it, especially in this instance where it's all tied up in legal offices. I don't got a JD. I don't pretend to understand it all. That's where that part of realignment is. Previous realignments had nothing to do with that. There wasn't this sort of legal binding agreement that they're all fighting to try to get out of. We didn't know Texas and Oklahoma were even candidates for realignment, let alone actively publicly trying to break free from their conference. So it's a little bit different in that regards. I get it. What I don't get is why Greg insists on lobbying Congress when he steps up to the mic every year to ask them to do something. First off, when the hell was the last time they did anything? They don't do. They're the worst Congress in the history. I don't know much, But I do know that it's like the bills passed. It might be the all-time lowest in the history of any Congress ever. Okay, it's got to stink, and that's not a political statement. That's an objective statement. Secondly, they have no incentive to help these schools. Like what is it? Ted Cruz is a Texas fan, right? So that's his only incentive. I mean, why would there's part of it where the politicians would help because it is their constituents, but like, does like adding these guardrails really help them? Anytime they have hearings, they just go up and they just bitch and moan about like, well, these kids making money now and blah, blah, blah. And it's just a bunch of just mumbo jumbo bull crap that means nothing. I just don't. I understand wanting some sort of centralized authority, but why do you insist on? I don't understand the why like it with Congress. It irks me that we keep beating this drum, this big blue drum every year, the big blue drum that doesn't exist, because it's not like nothing's going to happen. So why are you wasting air on it? Why don't you scheme and you come up with your own way to make yourself college football commissioner, right? Like, wouldn't that be more practical and better of your time served than just talking about Congress? Or maybe, ooh, the dots are really connecting now. This is a part of the day too. We're on like hour 13 of working where I'm just got Pepe Sylvia stuff stretched all over the room. What if this Congress thing the whole time is just a big red herring? What if he's getting me worked up because he is doing the little finger and he's in the back rooms figuring it all out? You don't get that reference though, do you? You didn't do Game of Thrones.
I watch Game of Thrones. I'm just playing on the Dragon show.
Okay. But you know the little finger, right? Yeah. So you're picking up.
Well, that's what I said, like the Patino stuff in KSR. Like,
yeah.
Is he really Littlefinger? Like, is Rick Lord Baelish? I mean, what's going on here? Or is he just coming back here just to, pull a fast one on us? Or is he just pulling a fast one on Louisville? But I get what you're saying. And like all of these, they're going to tell us what they want us to know.
Yeah.
Not what is really going on. So, obviously they're not going to say what is really happening. I think it's important to know like why they want help from Congress. And Sankey did a really good job trying to kind of laying this out. Mm-hmm. And basically, like to put it shortly, there's different state rules.
Yeah.
Like Missouri they have a NIL loophole where those players can start earning money right away.
Only if they sign in Missouri. Yeah.
Only if they sign in Missouri. So that's advantage Tigers. And you're seeing that pay out or pay off, no pun intended there, in recruiting. With the way they're recruiting right now. That's how they got Williams with Aaron. He was probably going to Oklahoma. And then that rule changed, and he's a 5-star defensive lineman who's going to play for Missouri this year. So there's all of that. And they're still going to be in an NIL world once revenue sharing is installed.
Yeah.
Like that is still an area that teams are going to be playing in.
Yeah. It's just the extra money, added juice.
Sankey talked about like the other entrepreneurs. I can't remember what exactly said, like trying to get in position of power, like something along those lines. That's what he meant. It's like dealing with the hanger-ons and the middlemen and the people who organize, collect it, all of that. Dealing how they kind of deal with them and how they enforce their rules and how they get everyone playing inside the same arena, under the same umbrella. And so figuring that out is tough. To me, Nick, I don't see how you can do anything unless you make them employees. Like, I don't know how there's really a way around that.
And it's going to happen. Like, they keep losing lawsuits, and it's looking like it's becoming more and more inevitable. And then you eventually have
to figure out how do you get them employees and how do you find a way to negotiate a CBA.
Yeah.
And that to me is how you make it happen. I'm definitely not the smartest man in the room. I'll be the first one to admit that. But yeah, I think you bring up a good point. Why would Congress do this? They've been asking for 2 years now for help.
Yeah.
Now I think they have their best case now because these dudes are getting paid, right? Mm-hmm. Money's at hand. There's no antitrust issues because guys are making money doing what they're doing. So maybe they have a chance or an avenue here, and we'll see how it plays out. But but I did like what Sankey said in that we're going to figure it out regardless. Like, I trust in our leadership, which felt like to me, not necessarily changing his tune, but saying like, there's another, like, we can turn the boat if we have to. It's not, they're not all in on Congress they are. I mean, they are and they aren't. Like that's the number one path right now. But they'll figure out another path that they have to. And that's why I think I go back like the Big Ten group he made with like where him and Petiti were
boys.
Well, they're talking about stuff and not fighting about it and not going behind not like Kevin Warren stuff. Like they're actually get along and actually trying to. How do you go through this? How are you working this? How are you doing this? The advisory group, I think, is what they called it. And so you at least have that. And that was, I think, the big takeaway from Sankey's statement. It was really they're still relying on Congress, but I think they're open to other avenues. And the revenue sharing, like he said, that was big. It helped. It's a step in the right direction, but there's still
that's still going to be out there, right. And it was one of those things too that I was hoping to get a little bit more from him when it came to the House stuff, but he can't. There's not really anything he can say there.
Ross Dellinger reported this morning that they sent like a document saying how some of the stuff would work, and then they're going to their banter back and forth. But it's expected here shortly to where they're going to have an agreement on that. What roster scholarship limits would look like.
Yeah,
what
that's the big one
for baseball, basketball, and football, and then what would the total amount be? What they're going to pay.
Yeah, which is around 20,
revenue sharing,
22 million.
Which is kind of the projections. Yes.
Yeah. We also have tiebreakers, but he wasn't willing to publish that. And it's going to be the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, the best document ever, because it's going to be 8 points, 8 bullet points, and I'm not going to understand it until like the last one. They're like, flip a coin. Because there's going to be so many different winning percentages versus common opponents and that sort of deal.
Listen, everybody, right here. Don't worry. I will. Oh, right there.
You're staring at the microphone, not the computer. The microphone is the words, not your face.
When Kentucky goes 6-2, and we're trying to figure out scenarios for maybe how they win the SEC, we will have that figured out. Don't worry. I got you on this. We will have that figured out. No confusion. We will do that. We will have you covered. So do not get too worried about the math, and do not do the Charlie Day gifts. We just come to KSR and we'll have you covered on that.
We'll have you covered. Don't you worry about it. But anything else from Greg Sankey Pop? I think
there was a lot there to unpack. Those were kind of the big things to me.
Yeah, I appreciated the guy who was like, "Well, Texas is used to running stuff." Or they thought they ran things in their old conference. Well, and he kind of was like, we're all peers here together.
Yeah. Well, he gave a big Blue Nation shout out to the football crowd for going to A&M.
Yeah.
That was kind of not. Well, he didn't get asked about that, but I think that was the point he was making. How this is a whole league doing stuff. It's not just Texas and Georgia. Like this is everyone brings something to the table.
Yeah, even Kentucky fans who you aren't thinking about right now, little old Kentucky, they're going to show up by the thousands to come to Kyle Field. Was his overall point, which that was their what's the slogan? 16 strong is on the banners, and that one, yeah.
I can't. It was I can't remember what the 14 slogan was. Now we're 16 strong.
Yeah, and that's all over the place. And right now it's a big kind of call of unity. This is the big kumbaya before we all start ripping each other's heads off. Which it's just fascinating. That's what's fun.
Inevitable.
And it's fun about being here too. Is there is an excitement. There's a buzz, and there's also I'm just got my head on a swivel with all these new guys. Like Barry Trammell is the one guy who I've known that's an Oklahoma person. He's been in that newspaper, I guess it's the Oklahoman, as a columnist forever. Right, and you hear that at SEC Media Days, and you're like, what? And then you pointed out Mike Gundy's brother was here.
Yeah, Kel Gundy was here.
It's like he's doing radio or something. It's just
he was like the one random former coach. Like Derek Mason was here last year, and it's like, oh. I didn't even realize, Kel Gundy, a guy who's been on Luckett's offensive coordinator hot board for the KSR at a time or two, was there. So, yeah, you see some former coaches, you do see a collection of people. We see some, friends of the program that we don't get to talk to a lot here, too, as well.
Oh, yeah.
You'll see them on our YouTube channel.
Yeah. Caught up with the bald guys, Cole and Pate State, which things are a little different now, too, where there's no longer the CBS and the ESPN breakout rooms. It's all ESPN. But, I mean, just looking up at the stage, I was like, who's that guy? Oh, wait. Dusty Dvorak is doing SEC. He's Big 12 Dusty. Now he's SEC Dusty? Like, it just, I know that might seem very silly and asinine to some of you all, but for me, I'm like, oh, okay, this is different. This is different. I'm just like it'll be different tomorrow when Texas takes the stage tomorrow, correct?
I believe so. I know Georgia's on. I think Texas might be Wednesday, but it could be wrong.
And I got it all backwards because I'm curious. We didn't see a ton of people here, a ton of fans. Do the Longhorns? They care about SEC football? Are they built for this? Are they not going to show up to media days to spot Nick Saban? Oh.
Yeah, we've got Georgia and Kirby Smart's probably 20-minute opening statement.
No,
kick off the day tomorrow.
He cannot wait to just talk and talk and talk, so we don't have to ask him about reckless driving.
Yeah. Tennessee, Oklahoma, and then your best friend, Eli Drinkwitz.
They really made us do Drinkwitz and Beamer on back-to-back days. Like I'm full of enough bullcrap for 24 hours. I don't need to be force-fed anymore. Which Shane, I mean, he had a line today, and he was proud of it. He was so proud of it, and he was prepared. Which, by the way, 17-minute opening statement. Dude will not shut up. I'm not going to be that long this year, I promise. 17 minutes later, he's still talking. He was asked about his running back, Rocket Sanders, which really that's the reason why South Carolina, like the inability to have any running game at all is why they sucked last year, right? Why they backslid. It's a crying shame that Kentucky lost to them. One of the worst losses of the Stoops era, in my opinion, because that team was not good. They had no offensive line. They couldn't run the football. They had to fix that this offseason. Big part of that was paying more money than anybody was willing to pay for Rocket Sanders, who was, when the numbers were flying around, people were like, he wants that much? Because he was a 1,400-yard back 2 years ago, and then he only played 6 games last season due to injury. And when they asked Beamer about how he's progressing after having off-season shoulder surgery, he said, man, what we're doing with Rocket is rocket science.
In his recovery, yes.
I mean, I'm not one to criticize for bad jokes. Like I have my fair share of them, but really, like that you couldn't do anything more with that. He can't help himself. It just can't.
I think, like the kind of sentiment I got from Beamer is like he knows how big this year is for them.
And he's trying to tell us all, like, I really believe. I don't know.
Does he believe it?
Or is he saying it to try to manifest it? Is he doing the LeVar Ball thing? Is he just, like, trying to speak it into existence? Andy Staples has a theory on that, maybe there's something to it. But when he said, I believe we'll be good, most of you won't. You'll pick us 14th, 15th, 16th in the league. And I almost just raised my hand and was like, yeah, that's me right here. This guy.
Yeah, my thing on it, I wrote it today on KSR Plus, so definitely get on there. And I think Andy touches on this topic as well. They're not coming out and saying it, Nick, but like they're making a shift on offense. They are going to a spread, gun, run game, and they're going to become a run-heavy team. They paid their NIL salary cap, whatever it was, a good percentage chunk of that went to get Rocket Sanders to Columbia, South Carolina.
Yeah.
And they are going to give him the football, and they're going to run it. But I think they're going to do it in a different way than we've seen them operate, more of a kind of a pro-style-ish, kind of hybrid between college spread. I think they're going to lean more spread. And Dow Loggins, who's their offense coordinator, was at Arkansas for 2 years.
Yep, with Rocket.
After being in NFL, worked under Kendall Briles. And when Kendall Briles was there, Arkansas led the league in rushing both years. And Rocket Sanders was a big part of that. And Lenore Sellers, their new quarterback, is built like KJ Jefferson.
Yep.
He's 240 pounds, north-south runner, really good athlete, who's going to be a threat running the football. in South Carolina, the last 3 years, they ranked like 12th, 11th, and 14th.
They're 14th last year, 85 yards a game.
In rushing yards, too. So, like, they're going to run the football. And I think they're trying to keep it quiet, but, like, I think you can see the signs. And from a Kentucky aspect.
Oh, bring it on. Try to run it against us.
Well, it's really important to be prepared for what's coming because it's the first real game.
Yeah.
That's game 2 for both teams. Both teams play a G5 team week 1.
Mm-hmm.
Both teams are going to have a little bit of element of surprise with Sellers and with Brock Vandergriff at Kentucky with you. But that's what they're going to do. They're going to come out and try to run the football. I think you're right. I think for Kentucky, they match up well with that this year, what they're going to try to do. And basically what I'm doing at KSR Plus this week, I'm trying to write, like, what are they really, like, what are they really telling us?
Read through the coach speak.
Yeah, and I think really South Carolina, they're leaning into this run game, and a lot's tied to it. But it's not just Sellers. Like, Robbie Ashford's their backup quarterback.
A runner, a big guy.
A guy who's
from Auburn.
Who's limited to throwing the football, but he can absolutely run that sucker. You know, and we've seen him do it, and like he lit up Alabama 2 years ago on the Iron Bowl. In Brian Harson's, I guess he wasn't there; he already left. But when Cadillac was the head coach, interim, so that's what they're doing, and it's different. It's a change for South Carolina, but that's what they're going to try to do. And like Sellers is one of the more, I had him as one of the more important individuals in the SEC this year because of that change and how important he is to the program. Because if he can be like their Dak Prescott is that kind of guy, that level, like he could be a franchise quarterback. He's kind of what to me is going to determine the Beamer era.
Yeah.
Like what does he end up being?
And we talked about this previously. Backsliding. I mean, when you start going in the wrong direction, it's hard to redirect that. And I know there's some people out there who are saying, "Wait, isn't that Mark Stoops?" It really applies if you have a losing record. Like once you have one losing record, it typically turns into 2, and then you're fired. It's very rare. I think Gus Malzahn is one of the few that's been able to overcome that. But for the most part, just historically speaking, once you start to lose your footing, you slip and you fall. It's Charlie Brown and
even Gus, to your point. They have the miracle year in 2013.
Yeah, he's got a national championship, you know.
They had at least 4 losses every other year. Yeah. Even the year they won the West in 2017, it crumbled at the end. Mm-hmm. So, like, to your point, like, once you get it there, but if you take that decent step back, it's hard to get it back up there. And now we've seen Kentucky be able to do that to that 9-3. So can Shane Beamer do that? But with Kentucky, they kind of had to reinvent themselves a little bit. Like they had to change their offense when they went to Liam Cohen and that pro style. I think we're seeing South Carolina, you know, what they tried the first 3 years, I guess. You know, they had the 2-game run essentially where they beat where Rattler just caught fire and they look like one of the best offenses in college football with Marcus Satterfield dialing up the place. Now there's internet rumors that he might not have been calling those plays during those games before he left for Nebraska, but they haven't really been able to get that back. And last year wasn't really on Rattler. Like they got some of the best quarterback play in the league last year, and they finished 5-7 because the offensive line was an absolute train wreck. They could not run the football, and their defense has been. I mean, if we're being honest, they've been one of the worst defenses consistently over the last 3 years in the league. They've been towards the bottom in most rankings. So, can they reinvent themselves? And if they can't, you're right. He's probably toast there if they can't do it. And so it's a really important year for Beamer because they got to get this right, and they
kind of got to start it in Lexington too.
In the portal era, they've decided to bet on the unknown. Essentially, so we're going to find out if that was a good bet or not. And we're going to find out against Kentucky pretty early because they go Kentucky, LSU back to back weeks 2 and 3,
which is not fortune favors the bold. It does not favor people that got to start the season like that because LSU, for as much as they've lost, still have a lot. 3 first-round picks from the best offense in college football, the most productive offense in college football last fall. And somebody asked a question about. How are you able to go from Notre Dame and have success? It was one of them kids that's just happy to ask a question sort of deal and gave him a soft toss. And Brian Kelly's like, having the number 1 offense wasn't good enough. And that is often the case when you're in the SEC and you have a defense that, can't stop a nosebleed, right? Like they couldn't do anything. So you bring in Blake Baker from Missouri, which he didn't say in the big room, but he was asked elsewhere. And a lot of that comes down to he's confident that Blake Baker can have the relationships to get the most out of his defenders. The last guy couldn't, a.k.a. Matt House. Like, there was just something there that they weren't jiving with that guy. I can envision that. I can envision Louisiana just not hanging with House. But the funniest thing, like, Kelly, he was a little weird today. He was talking really slow. Like, I don't know, something was just off by him. But then once the questions started flying, he was just talking. And they asked, if you could do anything differently than Harold Perkins last year, what would it be? And he's like, well, I timed out and make him eat. Needed to get bigger, which that amused me. I don't know what they're going to do, but I do. What Baker did at Missouri and how quickly they snapped out of that was very impressive because they were the worst of the worst under Wilkes. And
bad. Yeah, bad.
He turned that around almost instantly. And then offensively, you lost Jane Daniels, but Garrett Nussmeier is a former top 100 guy, is the son of the Eagles quarterback coach. Like, there's a lot of reasons to believe in Nussmeier and just to believe in Brian Kelly. And the point you made while we were talking about the ride down is like, they also got a nice little path that you don't often get in this new version of the SEC that's not going to be as palatable. So there's plenty of reasons to believe that LSU is going to be one of those teams that, in the middle of November, they're going to be lobbying that they should be one of the best 12 teams in the college football playoff.
Yeah, it's kind of unique because they've got Lincoln Riley vibes. And guess who they play week 1? In Vegas. USC. So, because of that offense and no defense. But you trust LSU to get it back more than you would trust Lincoln Riley. I mean, Brian Kelly's done it before. But I talk about them, Nick, like, do I think LSU is a top 5 team in the SEC? It's close. But we've got to look at the schedules. These schedules really matter when kind of projecting. And you look at who they play in conference play. Like, they go to South Carolina. They go to Arkansas. They go to Florida. And they go to A&M. They can win all those games. They get Vanderbilt at home. They get Alabama at home. The Saban thing's gone.
Yeah.
And Kelly's already beat them.
Yeah.
And then if Jane Daniels doesn't get hurt, who knows what would have happened in that game? That probably goes down the wire last year. So you look at their schedule and it's just like, man, that's a pretty good slate there that they can take advantage of some situations. Like, they could play the three worst teams in the SEC when you look at Arkansas, Vanderbilt, and South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So they're a team I think people are being a little sleeping on a little bit because I can see the 10-2 path, and that's what he's done every year. 9-3, 10-2, and then they're setting up. I think, or I guess they went 9-3 both years, but I think the schedule really sets up 10-2, and for them to get in the playoff. Mm-hmm. In Baker's, I think stylistically, Nick, it's an upgrade over what Matt House was doing because now it's going to be, hey, Harold Perkins, see ball, hit ball.
Go get it.
Just whether you're
do the Micah Parsons thing.
Whether
just go get him.
Whether you're playing off-ball linebacker or edge.
It doesn't matter. Get the damn ball. Go tackle the guy with the football.
It's blitzing. It's pressure heavy. We're coming after you, and we're going to send you. We're not going to mess around with linebackers and them dropping. Now, to play that style, you got to be able to cover people in the back end. Now, and that was a big question for LSU, so that's the one big worry I would have for them. But I think the schedule really lines up. Like, we know floor-wise, like Brian Kelly can coach football, win football games. He's done it in Cincinnati, Notre Dame, Central Michigan, and now he's doing it at LSU, where where you can argue, well, he's not going to reach the high level, but bare minimum they're going to go 9-3, right? And so I think they're a team that people are sleeping on.
They should be among the Ole Misses and Missouris of the world, where you're talking about them as this dark horse.
It feels like they are not.
Yeah,
to me.
Yeah. Which, we got Ole Miss today, and it was very unusual because we got a subdued Lane Kiffin. Wait, what? Huh? And part of it, I think, is his father recently passed away. I mean, they still haven't had a service for him yet. So, that's a pretty short turnaround. Monty Kiffin passed away on Friday. Coaching legend, the progenitor of the Tampa 2, who went out with a bang. He got to spend his last years of coaching with his son as an offensive or as an analyst, right? He got to play the QC role. So I think some of this is Lane. He's got that going on in his life, so he doesn't want to come in and talk smack. But the one thing he did say that was notable was talking about the rat poison, Luckett. We didn't have Nick Saban there to warn us about the rat poison. So now it's Lane Kiffin talking about the rat poison and then playing nice and saying, as I reached out with Coach Saban, we talked about it before. And it was different. It was different Lane Kiffin. I'm not used to seeing it like it. It was odd.
Yeah, because he's been really good, like whether it's talking about free agency or like being resistant to change or all of this, like at least giving us something to talk about. I think, his first year was like analytics he was talking about. That was a big thing because he had the most fourth down attempts the year before. But this year he was subdued, and I think obviously his father just passed. That's a big thing, and it's tough. Like, I mean, it just happened. He has to come and do this, so that's tough. He really hasn't had much time to even reflect on everything. So that's tough. But I think he brought up the rat poison and managing transfer portal and like melding your current roster with these transfers. And to me, like it's never blown up on him when he's doing this transfer heavy stuff. Like what happened with Louisville and Jeff Braun where they had to kick the guys off the team, right? Like that hasn't really happened for Ole Miss yet. And so is this the year where it maybe blows up on them? Well, I mean, we don't know. But dealing with the rat poison is the thing. Like people are ranking them top 5. Not top 5 in the SEC, like number 5, number 4 in the country.
Overall.
There's not only playoff expectations, some think like they are a legitimate national title contender. So if they miss the playoff, like this is going to be a disappointing season for them. Like that's where the bar is for this program heading into this year. Now there's a lot to like Jackson Dart's back at quarterback. They've got all the pieces there to be a good offensive line. They've got their running back room is deep. They might have the best wide receiver unit in the country. You know, you're adding Juice Wells from South Carolina. You're turning Trey Harris, who was an all-SEC guy last year. Jordan Watkins caught like 50, 60 balls in the slot last year. He's a really good player.
Prescorn's probably first-team all-SEC tight end.
Prescorn's a really good kind of stretch the field tight end up the seam.
And then
defensively, they've got pieces.
And that was Saban's quote today because it's so weird. Nick Saban, media member, right? He gets turned down because he doesn't bring his credential to the event down at SEC Media Days. But he did say, hey, I got Texas and Georgia in the SEC championship game. But I do think, his quotes, that Ole Miss has that length and size to compete against the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world. Where he kind of thinks they're the next tier down. And you add Walter Nolan, you add Princely there we go. You got it. I don't. Which, by the way, his brother's name is Princewell, and he's Princely.
I think he's at Nebraska. Yeah.
What jerk parents? Like, come on. You can't name your. They're both Prince. Like, how are you gonna find one from the other? Like, was it Princely or Princewell? How did that go around in the house when they were hollering somebody's name? You know, I digress. They got some big guys in the trenches, and that should help their defense because that was ultimately what cost them from another win or two a year ago.
Yeah, and you kind of look at their defense. I kind of ran through this at KSR Plus when I was previewing Ole Miss. Early scouting report came out. Like the whole defense, like all former transfers starting.
Yeah.
Whether it's their guys that have been there a couple of years or new ads. I think they could have like up to 5 or 6 first-year transfers starting. Pete Golding is their defensive coordinator from Alabama, so that might have to do with some of Saban's confidence there. But like, what if those pieces don't gel on defense? And then what if the defense falls apart? And then what if the offense? What if losing Judkins was a bigger loss than we were all willing to admit?
Yeah.
What if Juice Wells is still hurt? Injuries have been an issue for him both the years at South Carolina. But the schedule is favorable for them.
Yep.
But it's interesting game because Kentucky's going in there and they're really the first challenge they're going to have. And Kentucky will have been challenged twice, I think, at that point in the year. They played South Carolina at home and Georgia at home, and then you get the Ohio game. But Ole Miss, I believe they go to Wake Forest. They play an ACC team, and we know how Nick Roush feels about ACC teams.
Not even real.
So they're going to be. There's probably some light work. I believe it's Wake Forest that they play, but they're going to be 4-0 playing that game, and it's very similar to me, Nick, to the last time Kentucky went down there. I think Ole Miss. This is probably a better Ole Miss team, and there's obviously more hype around this Ole Miss team, but they're going to be kind of a similar situation, and I think that's why Kentucky probably should have won that game last year.
Yeah,
it's because that was really Ole Miss. Like that was the first time they got in a fist fight really all season.
Right,
and I think Kentucky had them on the ropes, and they let go of the rope, lack of a better term. They missed their kill shot, essentially. But can that same thing happen this year?
Poorly timed.
We don't know. But we'll see where they're at. Oh, you know what I meant. I didn't mean it like that.
I'm just teasing. I'm getting slap happy. Like I said, the yawns are creeping up on me, which is why when I say, here's what Clark Lee said. Vandy football, everybody, hey! But seriously, I feel bad for the Vandy kids because just nobody cares. Like, the biggest thing they did this offseason was hire Jerry Kill, and it's just weird. Jerry Kill, the dude is the worst at retiring. He's the worst. He retires, and then he unretires, retires, unretires. Who's the guy that did that today again?
Jeff Tedford.
Jeff Tedford keeps retiring and unretiring. And Clark Lee just can't give a snappy answer. You ask him about Jerry Kill. I'm like, oh, here's a fun quote to use. Nope. 5 minutes of talking. I watched them. I love their offense and blah, 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 blah. But, I mean, what Jerry Kill did at New Mexico State is one of the most shocking things ever because that's the worst program in college football. I think pound for pound, worst FBS program in college football. They hadn't had a winning season since the 60s. I'm pretty sure that's correct. He had 2 of them in a row, and second one was
they went to one bowl game in 2017. But other than that, it's bottom of the well.
I mean, it is bad. Just like 2 wins, 3 wins, 2 wins, 3 wins. He wins 7 in his first season, and then goes 10-5 after losing to UMass in the opener. So to do that, I got a lot of respect for Jerry Kill. But like, is that enough for Vandy? I mean,
yeah. Here's my where Vandy is sentiment. Like, they're running this New Mexico State offense, which was very QB run centric.
Yep.
And that's where they're kind of run. Diego Pavio is a fun football player. He's going to play quarterback for them. Whether it translates to the SEC or not, we'll see. Are they good enough up front? I worry about the backs. I know Cedric Alexander is a young tailback that looks promising, but can he deliver for them? And then defensively, they haven't been able to stop a nosebleed. The Lee tenure and into the last part of the Derek Mason tenure. He's taken over the defense to be his defensive coordinator. He hired Jerry Kill. Like, Jerry Kill's not the offensive coordinator. Tim Beck, who was at New Mexico State, is the offensive coordinator. Jerry Kill is basically he's the head coach of the offense, essentially.
Yeah.
So all of Lee's time can just be spent on the defense. Now, I'm really against that from a defensive coach standpoint. Whenever I think the track record of that like saving the team is very, very low. That's hard to do.
It might work for offensive play callers, but never defense.
I think in season, you can, for a 6 or 7 game stretch, if it's bad enough, you can get in there and fix it.
Like what Stoops did with DJ Elliott that one year, 16.
But I think one of the best moves Mark Stoops made, because it wasn't really the popular move at the time, was giving that up.
Mm-hmm.
Giving that up and letting someone else call the defense. And Dave Aranda's doing the same thing at Baylor, and I just don't think either one is going to work out well for either. And I think it's going to maybe see improvements on the defense, but you're missing half of a. Like, to me, it's too hard to call defense and then head coach.
Yeah.
Like, no one does it. I mean, maybe Belichick did it, Gary Patterson did it, but I would say those two are freaks.
Yeah.
Like, Nick Saban wasn't doing it. You can run your defense and not call it, but you always see somebody else calling defensive plays. And that's why Brent Venables hired Zach Alley, who we'll talk about probably tomorrow, was for him to have somebody he trusts run his defense, because you can't call it.
Too much going on.
Yeah, and so that's the thing I will worry about with Vanderbilt. It just looks like another long year, and I think it feels like the Lee tenure is heading to an end eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the story of that is, like, the job just changed way too much from when he took it.
Yeah.
NIL wasn't a thing when he took it. He had like this development plan that he was around at Wake Forest when he worked for Dave Clawson. He worked for Mike Elko, who kind of did the same thing at Duke. But in the SEC, I think it was just too hard to pull off, and he botched his first coordinator. He botched his coordinator hires early.
Yeah.
One, he hired the receivers coach from the Packers or whatever, who they demoted during fall camp. So whatever went wrong, like, that was a total whiff.
Yep.
And then they caught some bad break when Jesse Minter went to Michigan.
I totally forgot that the coordinator, they just demoted him before the season started. In the middle of training camp.
I mean, that's a huge story if it's anywhere in this league other than Vanderbilt. But it was at Vanderbilt, so he just totally whiffed, which is the most important hire a first-time defensive head coach can make.
Yeah.
Is you got to get the first OC right. At least get it where he's competent, where you can have a decent level of offense, and you can figure out what you want to be stylistically and identity and philosophy-wise after you get some games on your belt. Well, he realized in like the before fall camp started, and it wasn't going to work.
It ain't gonna work. It ain't gonna work.
And so
bro.
that is the story of Lee. I think he just had some missteps in the job change, and now it's a hard job to climb out of anyway. Now they got a 300-pound backpack on, trying to climb out of a sinkhole. It's trending the wrong way, and I don't necessarily think he's a bad coach. I just think the job change, he had a couple missteps, and they're having a hard time, I think, recovering from that.
I feel like I could eat a 300-pound ox right now. I'm really hungry, so I would like to go. You down for some brisket, maybe?
I could crush some brisket right now.
That sounds
See,
delicious.
I don't know about you, Nick. I know like Carolina barbecues, a lot of people like.
I like the sauce. I'm a big fan of the mustard sauce.
But the Texas barbecue, I'm a big fan of because it's brisket driven, right?
Yeah.
Like that's where I'm at. I'm brisket driven. I like the sausage too.
Yep.
I know Andy talks about it more pork driven. To me, like I got a good brisket is how I determine a good barbecue place, and we're excited to try some out tonight.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to it. If you're looking forward to changing something else, changing things up, give Andy Luckett a call. Andy Luckett from myperfectfranchise.net, myperfectfranchise.net. He's got expertise in the world of franchising, so if you're trying to do something else, you're looking for a new passion, Andy has got you covered with expert consultation services that'll help you get your start. Reach out to Andy. He's got a ton of knowledge in this role. The best of all, his services are 100% free for you always. So go on in. Go to myperfectfranchise.net. You can also reach out to him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. That's where you can email him, or give him a call at 404-973-9901. That's Andy Luckett at myperfectfranchise.net. And with that, now we have the one, the only, Andy Staples. Radio is at SEC Media Days here in Dallas, and we're joined by Andy Staples. Andy Staples on 3. If you aren't subscribed, what are you doing? Get over there. Do it right now. Andy has been covering college football for not too long. I'm going to say a long, long time, but you're okay. So you are old. We're confirmed old. But we're in the SEC footprint.
Yep.
We haven't been out of it. We haven't ventured out of it. I don't know what to expect from Texas. I don't know much about Texas. So what are we in store for? What's Big Blue Nation going to experience when they go down to 40 acres in November?
Oh, it's going to be, tons of good food. So you got to figure out what you want. You got to figure out your barbecue plan of attack. Right. But don't just do barbecue. Ooh. Do some other variation. There's also burgers, tacos. Now, you could do a variation of barbecue. Like you do brisket ramen.
Brisket ramen?
Kamuri Tatsuyan. They also have octopus Frito pie at this place.
What?
Oh, yeah.
So what you're saying is Texas rules.
There's a place called Loro that's like Korean, Mexican fusion barbecue. It's unbelievable. They have wontons and guacamole. It sounds weird. You will not stop eating them. You'll just be the whole time.
I'm a little speechless. Is brisket the preferred? Is brisket the best barbecue?
I don't necessarily think so. I mean, I grew up in the Deep South, so I'm a pork guy for the most part. Like pulled pork sandwiches, pork ribs. In Texas, they have what they call the Texas Trinity, which is brisket, pork ribs, and sausage. And I like sausage, but it does terrible things to me. So, fair. Like brisket and pork ribs are the two things I'm probably going to get the most. But then the thing about the Texas folks is they do beef rib too. And the beef rib is sort of the Cadillac order. It's the thing that now, of course, with beef prices, it's like $48 for one. But if you want the impressive tray with just the giant long bone, the huge meaty rib, like that's what you're going for.
So on a serious football question with Texas, the 2005 team, that was for a Kentucky basketball-centric state. That was the first year that everybody in my middle school had an opinion about college football because USC dominated the sport. Vince Young comes in. He's awesome on the video game. Video game's a very hot on the streets topic right now. But we've always heard this notion of Texas being back. Can they ever be back in the SEC?
Were they ever? See, the thing that you have to remember about Texas is they're historically inconsistent. Texas has not had these massive, like Oklahoma is the one that has the massive periods of dominance. Texas has had some good stretches, but they've also had some lows. Like they're more like Auburn, like roller coaster ride. Actually, USC is probably the best example where they've got all the resources, they've got the location, they've got the name, but they've had these really up and down. And when they're up, they're really up, but they also can be really down. And I think that's what makes them weird. Like it's very strange because Oklahoma is the more consistent program through the years. Texas has all the capability to do everything. And then when you saw, like 2005 is when they put it all together. But that Mac Brown run was pretty spectacular. From 2000 to 2009, Texas was awesome. I guess you can go back to 98 when Ricky Williams won the Heisman, but Texas was awesome during that span. And then they wandered through the wilderness for a while. Like that's the thing. They have that tendency, and they've done that in the past as well. So we'll see, because Texas is good right now. I don't know how long that's going to last. None of us does.
That's what's fascinating to me, I think, with this transition, is because we've known Oklahoma to just be consistent, top 10, consistent. But now it's kind of flipped. Like it seems like Texas is entering the league in better position, but we don't know is Texas about to go on a decade run, or is that a one-year wonder type thing? That's what's so fascinating, I think, and we don't really know, because there's a lot of unknowns. Saban's gone. There's a lot of unknowns, I think, outside of the juggernaut in Athens. Like where does the hierarchy end up? And that's why this year, on top of the playoff and revenue sharing and all that coming, it's why it's so intriguing entering the season.
Well, remember the last time the SEC added teams? So Texas A&M and Missouri come in. Texas A&M was amazing right out of the chute. That's Johnny Football wins the Heisman that season. They go 10-2. If there had been a 12-team playoff, they'd have been the team nobody wanted to play in the 12-team playoff. Might have won the national title. They beat the national champ on the road that season. So, but who's had the more successful run in the SEC, A&M or Missouri? It's easily Missouri. I'll help you there.
2 SEC championship game appearances.
SEC East wins, and they were really good last year. Like they've been more consistent over the years, and so I think you got to take that into consideration. Like Texas is there right now, but Oklahoma's going to be fine because Oklahoma is never bad. Like they've had one down period in their entire history as a program, and that was the mid to late 90s essentially. They had weird Schnellenberger, well, and then John Blake, yeah. And then once Bob Stoops got hired, that's it. They're great again, and great for a long time. Because you think about as good as those Texas teams were we just talked about, who won more Big 12 titles during that stretch? Oklahoma did. So I have no doubt that Oklahoma's going to be fine. It's tough to come into the SEC in a year when you're retooling your offensive line completely, but that's not really, that's just sort of the breaks of the game in this case. But I will say, since Brent Venables has been there, he's worked pretty hard to get their roster into a shape that it should be as they enter the SEC. If Lincoln Riley had stayed, I don't know that they would have had the right kind of roster coming in. But this is as deep defensively as Oklahoma's been in a long time. And you got to remember, when Venables was the DC at Clemson, what was Clemson's goal every year? They were trying to win a national title, and they knew to do it, they were going to have to play Alabama or whoever came out of the SEC and have to be able to be as good as them. So Venables knew exactly what kind of roster he had to build, whereas I think a lot of other people might not. Now, Steve Sarkisian, same thing. He worked at Alabama, understood what he's going to be up against, and began recruiting to it immediately. Because remember, we find out that Texas is coming to the league right before Sarkisian's first season. Now, he'd been hired, he'd had a pretty full offseason, and then we find out at SEC Media Days they're coming. I'm sure he found out significantly before that, but probably not. That's probably not something he was told when he got hired, because I don't know that those conversations had even started yet. So he's done a good job, and really from that first full recruiting class after you found out they were going to the SEC, that class of 22, which is where a lot of their starting offensive linemen came from. Kelvin Banks, their left tackle, was in there. DJ Campbell was in there. That one sort of said to the world, we're taking this seriously. We're going to try to build in the trenches so that when we get to the SEC, we'll fit in.
I think that's the reason why you would buy stock on Texas. It's because they're building a team to beat in Alabama, to beat a Georgia on a neutral field in December or whatever, January, in game 15. They're building a roster like that, and that's why. But it's interesting, to Andy's point, is because we we haven't really seen them do it back-to-back years in a long, long time. So what's to say? And Steve Garcia, I can't talk now. Sark has a checkered past. Like last year, before going into last year was like, can he win double-digit games? Can he do it? And now you're asking, can he do it year over year over year? And they're like, and they're Texas. They got cool colors and they got the logo, and they're just a fascinating team, I think, heading into the year. And really, I don't think anybody knows kind of where to put. I know where to put them this year, but maybe not next year, or in 5 years, or in 10 years.
And I think, if they I think the NIL era has been good for them. I think they figured that part out. They can use those resources. And because remember, as great as Texas's resources were, they still weren't getting the best players. They were getting good recruits, but Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, they were getting the best recruits. Well, Texas is getting some of those guys now. Yeah. Oregon is getting some of those guys now. So the gap is closing between the superpowers and the ones who are in that next level down. And so Texas can make itself a superpower, or at least help close the gap some more and make it where instead of this little tiny select group, there's this bigger group of teams that's capable of playing for national titles.
To bring it a little bit back to Kentucky, going into the 16-team SEC, I think if you went back, I don't know, to tradition, right? We talk about history. Yep. History says if this happens in any other era, Kentucky's walking into a buzzsaw. Oh, yeah. And it's just the program systemically is just not set up for that. But if you want to make a case for Mark Stoops' greatest accomplishment, his greatest legacy, it's having a roster that's ready for the SEC in this form. But it still might not be good enough. So I think that's my question to you is, can it be done, and does it have to be done this year when they do have a very experienced roster going up against this tough schedule?
It doesn't have to be done this year, because I think you've seen over the years that Stoops has been able to consistently reproduce quality rosters. Like, they can evaluate, they can develop. I don't think they're ever going, as long as Stoops is there, they're not ever going back to what they were. Now, the question is, how much will Kentucky fans clamor to go up a level? And I think that's harder. I think for all the non-Georgia SEC East teams, the world has gotten much more difficult. Yeah. For the SEC West teams, the old SEC West teams, they're going to be like, well, our schedule was already hard. Like, ours was already brutal. There's nothing you can do to us that will hurt us now. Yeah. But if you're Florida, Kentucky, Tennessee, South Carolina, Vandy.
Not Missouri this year.
And Missouri, and now, no, Missouri's got a nice draw this year. That's true. But yeah. Tennessee did too, actually. But for the most part, your schedule is going to be harder most years than it was. So, and you're looking at Florida and Georgia this year. They got the bad end of the stick. Like, they got the draw. Right. So,
you have 4 road games at Florida, at Ole Miss, at Texas, and at Tennessee.
Oh, that's super easy.
Yeah. Of those 4 games, let's throw Florida out, because Kentucky wins.
They did win the last time there.
Kentucky wins there now. It's weird. They can win 4 in a row. But so let's say the other 3.
Yep.
We've learned Mark Stoops over the years. He'll probably lose a game he shouldn't. He'll probably win a game he shouldn't. So what's the most likely win that he probably shouldn't get on paper? And you know what? You might even throw Auburn at home in there.
Well, the Auburn thing's amazing to me, because it feels like so many, and then Kentucky fans are not guilty of this, but so many other fan bases that have Auburn on the schedule are just penciling in Auburn as a win. I'm like, did you guys not watch you freeze at Ole Miss? Have you not learned your lesson here? Yeah. Like, this is not a cakewalk team. But as far as those road games go, none of them sound appealing, those 3 that you gave me. Like, I was just going to say Florida, because they seem to be fine against Florida now. But I guess Tennessee. But Tennessee's going to be really good this year. I don't think people understand how limited their offense was with Joe Milton and how much better it's going to be with Nico.
Yeah, and we've been cheering for Nico's downfall.
Volleyball player.
Yeah, the volleyball player. Yeah. We've been hoping for it, but that feels like wishful thinking. Yeah. And it's also Tennessee. We've seen this song and dance before, but I don't know about you, but the Ole Miss, how close Kentucky has played them over the years, has me intrigued by it.
Yeah. The one thing on Ole Miss, and this is more of a general question, Andy, I keep waiting for the transfer thing to maybe blow up on him one year. When does that happen?
How does chemistry keep working?
When does it blow up? And we talk about that a lot locally with Louisville. This is what Brom's doing is eventually this isn't going to work. It doesn't make sense in how to build a roster mind that you can do this. But is there a team that you're looking at this week that maybe is a top 10 or playoff contender, a lot of playoffs that you think you could see like coming up short? Like who is the team that falls on their face this year?
Well, Ole Miss is the one that everybody seems worried about, but the thing, and that's for the reasons you just suggested, like how can they continue to have good chemistry when they basically revamp the roster every single season? And I would argue that you haven't watched how they've done this if you think that's what's going to happen, if you think they'll just fall apart, because they've done a good job of taking guys, for the most part, with a ton of eligibility left. Now, this is like the Walter Nolan, Princely Emmanuel is a little bit different thing, where those guys, they're off to the NFL after this year. But for the most part, Ole Miss has taken guys that had more time, and that has actually helped them kind of congeal. And I was talking to Jared Ivey about this today. Jared's been there 3 years. This is 3 years now. He was at Georgia Tech for 2 years early in his career. The core of their team came from somewhere else, but has been there for a while. And that's, they kind of know how they play together.
There's certainly value in that. I watched Shane Beamer go up there today, and there's just everything in my soul it like cringes, and he's talking about Rocket being a Rocket. The South Carolina game can be the swing game for the season. What could South Carolina do that would maybe make Kentucky fans a little worried that somehow this dork is going to beat them 3 straight seasons?
That Lenoris Sellers is the X factor that he might be.
But if he was, wouldn't Beamer just say, "You're the quarterback, go do it"?
No, they're sandbagging. Remember Manziel in 2012? Remember when they announced him as the starter?
People said who?
It was like the week of the first game. Like they ran that thing, but they knew all along who the starter was going to be.
Okay, so you're saying that maybe he is the Tebow that they talked about as a recruit that could come up. Maybe Nick Harbor can play receiver, even though he should be a defensive lineman.
Well, look, listen, you can't have an Olympic sprint career as a defensive lineman, I guess, apparently. that seems to be the consensus. So that I'm curious to see what they do with Nick Harbor. But the thing about South Carolina is they have, of teams at that level, they have gotten more kind of special blue chip talent than anybody else. Like even more than maybe Auburn. Because Cam Coleman now at Auburn. But the last few years, Auburn hasn't been doing that. The Brian Harsin years were a thing. So, but South Carolina has some actually really special players. Now, do they have a very deep roster? No. I still worry about their offensive line. But if Lenoris Sellers is very special, he can elevate them, and that's where you have to worry if you're playing them, if they've got a truly dangerous quarterback. And we don't know that until we see him.
You got anything else?
Another thing, you don't know if it's Anthony Richardson stuck in a system around that's not the pieces do not fit, or is it a version of Dak Prescott at Mississippi State where they just take off.
I would argue that Kentucky just broke Anthony Richardson. That's the look on his face after that one-handed interception.
Yeah.
Or when even sooner when the little linebacker from Ole Miss picked him up and suplexed him. He was like, that doesn't happen.
Andy, you're talking college football all season long. If y'all aren't subscribed, like I said, do it. It's a great show live, 8 a.m. every day on all of the YouTubes and Twitters and X's, whatever.
My Eastern time brethren. That's beautiful.
Yes.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it.
I'm thrown off all this week, Central Time. But there's thousands and thousands of reasons to be excited about this college football season. But you got to pick one, right? What's going to be your favorite thing to talk about on a regular basis throughout this crazy college football season?
Just the playoff race, because there's going to be so many teams in it. In the 14 playoff, there's by the middle of October, there's 6 teams left truly in contention.
Right.
At that point, there's going to be 25 teams in contention, and I think you'll probably be still around 20 when you get into November. And I think that's going to be great. We're going to be scoreboard watching like crazy. We're going to be watching this Big 12 game to see how it affects this Big 10 team, this ACC game to see how it affects the SEC team. It's going to be so much fun.
It's going to feel more like we're NCAA tournament resume watching, right? Little scoreboard math?
Absolutely. Now, with Kentucky, that's not usually a problem. They're usually safely in. But the bubble watch for this is gonna be like the basketball bubble watch on steroids.
Spreadsheets will be popping. We'll be crunching numbers. And if you're 6-2 entering November, you're alive. You're more than alive. You're playing real meaningful football games. You're playing what you could say postseason games. I mean, we might get Kornacki up there drawing up what the percentages are. We don't know. It's just going to be wild, and it's going to be our first time all of us have experienced it. So we really don't know, and we don't know what the committee is going to value 1 year to the next. We've learned this from March all these years, and so that's going to be a thing that swings every year. And it's just going to, I think, it's going to give programs like Kentucky, if you can get to 6-2, 7-1 start, if you're having a good year, you're going to be not only alive, but even if you don't make it, you're going to be playing in games that are really, really important, and you're also going to get to play spoiler, Nick.
Kentucky's had a few seasons in the last few years. There's one where they would have made it, and then there's a couple where they would have been in the thick of it right up until the end.
Yeah.
So I think that's exciting. Like, they're
playing spoiler with your rival. I mean, they would have spoiled Louisville's playoff chances last year.
Absolutely, and I would vote for them to continue doing that until Louisville proves otherwise.
And it's like the backyard brawl when Pitt beat West Virginia, what 13-7?
13-7, yeah, the Steve Slayton, Pat White.
I mean, that is what makes college football great, and it's kind of hater mentality and loser mentality, but ruining your least favorite team's best season ever is almost as good as having that great season. It's
right up there.
Oh, man, and it's going to be here before you know it. College football will be here in no time. We appreciate y'all following us. Follow along Andy Staples on 3. We'll see y'all around.